This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Trump administration's moving to indefinitely detain migrant children and their families, reversing decades of U.S. policy. The Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Health and Human Services is expected to issue a new rule today to withdraw from a 1997 federal court settlement known as the Flores Agreement, which put a 20-day limit on migrant family detentions. If the administration's new rule goes into effect, migrant children could be jailed for months and even years while their immigration cases are heard. On Wednesday, Acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan said the new rule would serve as a deterrent to keep immigrants from coming to the United States.
No child should be a pawn in a scheme to manipulate our immigration system, which is why the new rule eliminates the incentive to exploit children as a free ticket, or as one gentleman in Guatemala told me, a passport for migration to the United States.
The proposed rule change has drawn intense condemnation from immigrant rights groups and human rights organizations. Amnesty International tweeted, "This is more than cruel. It's beyond logic and humanity," they said. We're joined today by Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, who's become a leading critic of Trump's immigration policy. Last year, he made headlines after he was barred from entering an old Walmart where the government was detaining around 1,500 immigrant children in Brownsville, Texas. Senator Merkley writes about the experience in a new book, America is Better Than This, Trump's War Against Migrant Families. Senator Merkley, welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Congratulations on your first book. I want to go to what's happening today, the Flores Agreement and the Trump administration. They're saying they're going to end it. Explain what this means and what you plan to do about it as a U.S. Senator.
Well, the Flores Settlement Agreement is about basic rules for treating children decently in a humanitarian style, meaning nutrition, health care, just the ability to have bedding and hygiene. It's just the basics of how you would want anyone treated. And this administration has absolutely been inflicting trauma on children as a strategy to deter immigration. And such a strategy goes in direct conflict with the Flores Agreement. So here is the President of the United States a few weeks ago saying we're not going to let kids outside to play soccer. Then saying we're not going to give flu shots, even though 3 refugee children have died of flu, and flu can move very quickly through those very crowded holding cells. This is an administration that appealed a rule that you had to provide soap and bedding to children.
And toothbrushes and
toothbrushes. I mean, the idea that you're going to force children to sleep on very cold holding cells, concrete floors, lights on all at night, and then proceed to ship them through a gulag, basically child prisons. They had 15,000 migrant children held in these facilities in December of last year. It's a shocking development for America to be in the business of deliberately harming children, and that's why we have to fight it. So here we have the Flores Agreement, and the administration says, well, we want to make sure we can imprison children indefinitely. And I just think, who in the world says we want to imprison children indefinitely, and they want to be outside of state licensing, and they want to be outside of state supervision. And we know where they're headed when they're outside of supervision because they've demonstrated it time and time again. So that is why this is so important. The key piece is that Flores says you can only hold children in a non-state licensed facility for 3 days under normal terms. 5 days if they come from a remote area, or during 20 days during a big influx. This would bust that down so they could hold children for years.
So you tweeted Wednesday, the Trump administration is now suspending virtually all asylum cases claims processing for the region served by Newark and Boston offices. You say there are over 40,000 cases pending in these offices.
Yes, so this was a development where people within that office forwarded an email that laid out the policy. It's an internal policy that they're shifting people off those 40,000 cases. In one sector, they say completely shutting down new cases. The other that said there'd be very few new cases. I was attacked by a member of the administration for spreading false information. I simply was reporting what was in the administration's email as to their plans. This means thousands and thousands of people will have their proceedings suspended.
We just came from the Arizona border, the Arizona-Mexico border on Monday. We were there in Sonora and Nogales and learned about the metering firsthand. And the number of people who are coming through the border, allowed to come through now, around 6 to 8, if they are lucky a day, with thousands waiting. People in Mexico, who are stopped in Mexico, are living in the graveyards. They're homeless. They're fleeing gang violence, afraid their kids will be kidnapped as they stay there. Is this legal? As President Trump talks about illegal immigrants and talks about invasion, are these actions legal?
So the president says, I don't want people crossing between ports of entry. Come to the ports of entry. And this has been something Jeff Sessions said when he was Attorney General, and others in the administration said, just come to the ports of entry. But at the port of entry, the administration has erected a blockade. I first witnessed this on the bridge down in Hidalgo-Reynosa border crossing. Our border guards across the middle of the bridge blocking anyone from coming across who didn't have a passport. In other words, anyone who was a refugee. The result is that families are stranded, as you're saying, on the Mexican side of the border. And that means without funds, without family, without friends. They're incredibly vulnerable. There are gangs that prey upon them. And now the administration has created this system where they have an informal accounting called the book. And the book is sometimes run by drug gangs. It's run in all kinds of different ways, but it is essentially, you have to register in this unofficial book and wait for your number to be called. And so it's another form of exploitation. But it's all in contravention of the vision of the Refugee Convention. Because the Refugee Convention is, if you are fleeing persecution and you knock on our door, we will give you safe harbor while we examine your case. That's what an asylum case is. In this case, we're saying, we will not give you safe harbor. Sorry, you're stuck in Mexico. Good luck. Maybe in a few months, we'll talk to you. And puts enormous people at risk. It makes me think of the St. Louis. The St. Louis was a ship in World War II that had some 900+ refugees from Germany. It came. It wasn't allowed to dock in the United States. The result is it eventually went back to Germany, and about a fourth of those refugees died in the Holocaust. We are, in this case, stranding people who are knocking on our door in very, very difficult circumstances.
Interestingly, that was during FDR's administration, a bipartisan immigration problem we've had for decades. We're going to continue with Jeff Merkley, Democratic Senator from Oregon, member of the Appropriations, Environment, and Public Works, Budget, and Foreign Relations Committees. His new book is called America is Better Than This, Trump's War Against Migrant Families. Stay with us.